several honorary doctorates. He received the Grawemeyer Award for Ideas Improving World Order in 1989. What does After Hegemony say? After Hegemony lays out a neoliberal theory of international relations. Neoliberalism is based on the idea that states can cooperate even without the influence and support of a single dominant power, known as a hegemon, as long as they obtain absolute gains, that is, cultural or economic benefits gained as a result of acting on a decision. Cooperation usually takes place through the decision of states to join an international regime. Crucially, this means that cooperation is neither forced on a state, nor is cooperation the result of a hegemon, or dominant power, taking the lead in the creation and continuation of a regime. According to this theory, cooperation is a more potent factor in the relations between states than neo-realist theory allows. Keohane develops this line of thought in After Hegemony. First, he explains the flaws in the realist theory of international relations, according to which international relations are based on competition, self-interest, and aggressive pragmatism. Keohane presents the evidence to support his argument that cooperation takes place even without the supporting influence of any single, dominantly powerful nation. Realist theory, he argues, cannot explain this. Neoliberal theory, on the other hand, lets us understand how states come to cooperate. It is a theory that takes account of certain key points. Rational choice. The idea that human behavior is driven by logical decisions designed to be beneficial. Functionalism. The theory that states have sufficient interests in common to arrive at similar decisions and further integration. Bounded rationality. The theory that rational behavior is limited by the amount of information we have, by how much information the mind is capable of processing, and by the time required to think something through. International cooperation is founded on the development of international regimes, institutions governing law, trade agreements, military pacts, and the like. States have a rational expectation that others will respect a regime they have freely joined by rational choice, and the interests of the states making up that regime should then converge, according to functionalism. Finally, bounded rationality will come into play, affecting the expectations of that group of states. Importantly, Keohane does not argue that states put the common good before their self-interest when they participate in an international regime. For those states, cooperation through an international regime is, indeed, their self-interest in action. This implies that the sovereignty of a state is not reduced when it joins a regime. Mutual suspicions have simply been overcome by shared interests. International regimes, therefore, do not change the nature of international relations. Without any central authority to impose any kind of law, they remain in a state of anarchy, with no authority compelling them one way or another. A regime simply alters the expectations of self-interested states, making cooperation between them possible. Having explained this, Keohane goes on to apply his neoliberal theory of international relations. The decline of American hegemony, he says, has not stopped cooperation, a position he supports by comparing case studies of regimes of trade and money on one hand and the consumer's oil regime on the other. According to Keohane, the trade and monetary regimes survived the decline of the United States in the 1970s for two reasons. First, these regimes were institutionalized. In other words, there were institutions underpinning both regimes. Second, the members of these two regimes wanted them to survive because of the benefits they gained from them. In contrast, the consumer's oil regime failed during the oil crises of the 1970s because there was no mechanism for their members to cooperate. Following on from Keohane, the success of the trade and monetary regimes, and the sharp contrast with the failure of the consumer's oil regime, proves that regime participants can choose to cooperate freely. This is the case, even if their core interests are at stake. Why does After Hegemony matter? Throughout the 1980s, there was a debate in the field of international relations between neo-realist